LawFlip, objection, your honor.
Turn the game upside down.
LawFlip, objection, your honor.
Turn the game upside down.
Okay, welcome to LawFlip. It's an unfiltered conversation about law, life, mental health, and everything in between. I'm Benjy Smith. So after years of practicing law, our guest referred to his mental state as scared, ashamed, crippled. Our guest wasn't sure he could be both a lawyer and have mental health disabilities, but he learned how to survive and thrive in big law. Looking forward to hearing about his journey and what happened after this big law attorney told the world about his depression. So we're excited to have Mark Goldstein on LawFlip. Let's flip the game upside down. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Sure. Okay, so where did you grow up, Mark?
I grew up in Westchester County in Harrison, New York.
Okay, and take us through your schooling.
Harrison High School. Then I went to Binghamton University, which was the best thing that ever happened to me. I got deferred from University of Pennsylvania, where I'd expected to get into because my brother went there. And I went to Binghamton because my parents had a rule: you can either go to a SUNY or state school or an Ivy. Binghamton was my safety school, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And my wife there, all my best friends there. Fordham Law after that, lived in the city for about a decade, with my then girlfriend, now wife, and now we live out here in Maplewood, New Jersey.
Beautiful. And then tell us a little bit about your practice. You're at Reed Smith, which is a big law firm. And what type of work do you do?
So I do management side employment law. I certainly do litigation, but I focus a lot of my practice on day-to-day advice and counseling, executive compensation matters, kind of the nuts and bolts of the employment relationship, which has proven, particularly right now with the pandemic, there's tons of, issues coming up on the advice and counsel front, relating, terminating employees to bringing them back to furloughing them, and everything in between. So, do everything across the employment relationship, including non-competes and, everything along those lines.
Yeah. And we do, and my firm represents employees, and maybe we'll have you on to discuss more of the employment stuff another time, but I really wanted to have you on because one of the main reasons we started this podcast was we found that not only with our situation, but with lawyers across the board, mental health is an extremely challenging topic when it comes to lawyers. And you're somebody who did bring that issue to the forefront of big law, to the forefront of just lawyers in general, and we really wanted to get your take on this. So let's maybe just go through some of the reasons why you had a particular challenge. What was your story like?
I think, and I've learned in the last few years that my story is not dissimilar from many other lawyers. At the time, I didn't realize how prevalent mental health issues are in the legal profession, and that many of the things that push us, and I use the collective us, towards being lawyers, that perfectionism type A, that contributes to, those are precursors and could be signs of mental health issues. So for me, it was, a drive to be perfect all the time, not wanting to, take time off from work, all of those things, putting pressure on myself unnecessarily, unrealistic expectations, that I imposed upon myself. All of that kind of, I think led up to, what was, a snap or a break, if you will.
Was it a snap or was it a progressive thing over time?
I think that's a fair question. I think it was probably a progressive thing over time, but I didn't realize it because, I just 1,000 different things and I didn't notice it. So to me, I perceived it as a snap, but it's certainly probably been building for years, perhaps going back decades, frankly.
What did what did the pain look like? Like on a practical level, on a day-to-day basis, what were some of the things? Because I think once people start identifying, it's very vague. You went through pain, you're in depression.
Right.
How could people understand more of what you were going through?
So for me, the onset, the snap happened Labor Day weekend of 2017. Like I can very vividly point to a specific time frame and what it looked like. There were two components to it. First, there was obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. which, looking back in it, I definitely suffered from my whole life. But the OCD manifested itself in a particularly crippling way, and what that was I convinced myself that I committed malpractice on some case I'd been on. Not a particular case, and this wasn't based in reality, but in my brain I was like, I must have committed malpractice. So I decided that I needed to go through every email I'd ever sent or received while at the firm, every document I'd ever drafted, looking for some evidence of malpractice. And I would do that during the day, on weekends, weekdays. I would do it in the middle of the night. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. My wife would say, hey, what's going on? I'm just going to get a glass of water. I'd go up to the third floor in our house, and I would search, another 1,000 emails looking for some evidence of malpractice.
Wow.
And there was no basis for it. And, of course, I didn't uncover anything. And it was, in retrospect, what you would call, irrational, but I was obsessed with it. It was dangerous. The other component to it was the depression/anxiety, which, for me manifested itself in a way that I just had no zeal to do anything. And I thankfully was not one of the people who ever felt suicidal or wanted to take their own lives. And, at the time I honestly didn't even think about that component of this. The last few years I've learned, unfortunately, about, how many people take their own lives and feel suicidal. But I did not think I would live until the next calendar year. And that was part of the depression and anxiety. Like, I had no will or interest in making it to 2018. I wasn't going to affirmatively do anything on my own behalf to not get there, but I didn't think I'd make it there. So, you combine the obsessive tendencies with the depression and anxiety, and it was, proverbial Molotov cocktail where, between Labor Day weekend of 17 and mid October of 17, when I ended up taking a leave of absence from Reed Smith, where I was in an extremely toxic, negative place.
Okay, so we've diagnosed sort of the problem the problems that you were having, or the challenges that you were having. I want to get into the solution, but before we do, I want to diagnose a few more of the challenging areas of how this intersects with being a lawyer. So, at the end of this list that I have in my, maybe you can chime in with a few more additional challenges. So, the actual work-life balance. What's the challenge there? And what's the challenge there with the work-life balance?
So here's, I probably view work-life balance very differently than everyone that may come on your podcast. Here's how I view work-life balance. In the 21st century, you have your personal life, you have your professional life, and they are going to be intertwined 24/7. However, the problem is that we only incorporate wellness and things like that, and taking care of ourselves both mentally and physically, into the personal side. We've got this professional side where, we have to, answer emails and work. Here, on this personal side, if we can fit in the gym on Saturday morning, great. We need to, because our lives are intertwined, we need to figure out a way to, weave in the wellness and the positivity into the professional side. So perhaps, for me, for instance, in the fall, or even sometimes in the summer when it's not as hot, instead of, taking the subway from my office to Penn Station after work, I'll do the 1.5 mile walk from my office to Penn Station. Get some fresh air, get outside, things like that. I will take 10 or 15 minutes to do a little breathing or meditation in the middle of the day. So for me, it's not necessarily separating work from personal life. I acknowledge that they are intertwined, and I've chosen a profession where they are inextricably intertwined, but I need to incorporate the things that I used to only incorporate, the positivity and the wellness in my personal life. I need to incorporate it into my professional life as well.
That's great. Okay, so the adversarial nature of the work that we do. So particularly for us, there is a sort of adversarial other side that is trying to fight us. And you're advocating for employers, I'm advocating for employees. And I just remember, my years of being so heated and, at war with the other side, I look back and I think about how I felt about my life and career then versus how I operate now. It's unbelievable that I even like lived long enough to get to this side. What was your experience transitioning from just that adversarial nature to where you are now? Or maybe you have or you haven't.
Yeah. No, so look, I every day or every other day I'm on the phone with, an opposing attorney, and I try, I believe that, kindness gets you further, whether it's with someone who's on your side or on the other side. So I will always start off with any opposing attorney by taking the position that, look, we're representing our respective clients' interests. This is not personal. Let's see if, oftentimes we're trying to resolve the matter before litigation. Let's see if we can work together, collaborate. At the end of the day, we're just trying to do the best we can for our clients. And I'll have that conversation with the opposing attorney, and I'll try to develop a mutual respect. Because yes, you may have to take your position, I may have to take my position, but at the end of the day, it's nothing personal against one another. And, so the tone that I'm talking to you in right now is the tone that I'll talk to an opposing attorney. I think, there's no reason why just because you're on opposite sides, if I scream at you, it doesn't mean you're going to grant my extension requests,
Right.
any more likely. And I found quite the contrary. The more cordial, courteous, professional you are to, other people, the more they're, likely to reciprocate. And, yes, do I have, opposing attorneys scream at me from time to time? Yes, but I've actually found that as the years go by, that's been less and less. And a lot of attorneys, I get on the phone with them or in emails, extend the same courtesies. And, I've had opposing counsel in the last couple of years refer cases to me because there's just no reason you can't treat somebody else, with the same respect. Same as if you go to a deposition and the plaintiff, former employee is there, you show him or her the same respect as you do their attorney. We're simply there to do our jobs.
Yeah. I wonder why it's been like this, and it's so hard for some even for us before we. I don't know if you ever struggle with this, so maybe I'm making an assumption. For me, I just thought that this was the way that we were supposed to do it. I really thought that, and I'm not even sure how I figured out how to get out of it. I think I realized like it wasn't effective, and it really hurt my personal life.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've early on, I could think of one particular case where every time I picked up the phone, the attorney at the other end would scream at me, and sometimes I wasn't so nice back. And you take that home with you, and it permeates into your personal life and other aspects of your professional life. And at the end of the day, I wasn't getting any better results, and the other attorney wasn't getting anything more. I wasn't willing to give any more by the fact that he was yelling expletives or raising his voice. It didn't make us want to try to resolve the issues at hand any better. So, it took some time, and sometimes I have to be firm, but that doesn't mean I can't be respectful and courteous and say please and thank you. And I found that, most attorneys now, I agree, you look in, the movies or TV shows, the attorneys screaming at the other attorneys. Maybe there was a time when that worked. I don't believe it does now.
I think to the extent that it does work where you strong arm somebody, it's not, the likelihood of it working is a net loss. So like to the extent that you can get something out of strong arming somebody, it's not not on a consistent basis. You may get it one time where somebody succumbs to your demands because they're just scared and their client's scared, but on a day-to-day basis, I don't think that you get better results. And then, so what about the sometimes or oftentimes mundane work? So a lot of times we go to law school, become lawyers, and then, the day-to-day grind of it, there's just, let's say you're not a law in motion person, or you're not somebody that likes to do depositions, you're kind of asked to be a 5-tool player like in baseball as a lawyer, doing a wide range of things. And how does that affect our mental health? Just the requirement to do a lot of miserable activities that like are inherently miserable.
I, for a long time, hated drafting deposition outlines. and I would, particularly at my old firm, I would put off drafting them as long as I could. And I'm someone who's usually, if something's due on Friday, I have it to 3 days in advance.
Right.
That's my normal MO. But Deposition Outlines stressed me out mentally. And then, after I had a few under
you were afraid, I don't know if you're like me, were you afraid that you would get to the end of a deposition and not ask certain questions? Was that the fear?
That I would miss something in putting in the outline, or that it would just take so long. That there is a particularly complex case that I wouldn't I'd leave out a document in preparation. I wouldn't sufficiently prepare. I wouldn't have sufficiently covered my bases, and then exactly when you get to the deposition, you close the deposition. Oh my goodness, I didn't ask about this line of issues.
Yeah, I had that fear very much. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I started doing them and some a few other similar tasks. I've always liked legal writing, so briefs and things like that have never stressed me out. But I realized that honestly, once I got started, it wasn't so daunting. It was just I needed to take the first step. So oftentimes I would put on my calendar, okay, start Johnson deposition outline. I'm not going to do it today. I'm going to schedule it for 10 a.m. tomorrow. And I'm going to start it at 10 a.m. tomorrow. I'm going to spend 2 hours on it. I'm going to get as far as I can. And then, honestly, once I started doing most of these things, and I also realized that, these things take practice. The briefs that I write now are more concise and more persuasive, hopefully, than they were 5 years ago. And the deposition outlines are, probably better than they were 5 years ago. Just take one step at a time. You can't control, what's going to happen in the end game. And that's always been a big part of my problem. And I think for many lawyers is looking 3, 6, 12 months down the road. So,
for sure.
Worrying about, something in 2 weeks or whatever, or how the final deposition outline's going to come out. Okay, just worry about the first few hours. Just start it off. Just see what happens. You'll get to the end.
I think that's a great point about fear, which is like most of the things we fear. I mean, I've had those same irrational fears about like committing malpractice or I think all these, like, if you look back, right now, I can't think of anything I've done in my legal career that I'm worried about. But how many times did I have this moment where I was like, I'm completely screwed. This is the end of my career, Right. And so but I want to add that in addition...
And by the way, not one of those times were we worried about a global pandemic shutting down the country.
Exactly.
It just goes to show you that you can't plan. But it just shows you can't plan for the things that are really going to be issues.
But I want to add one more thing. So in addition to that, I think we feel that we find a job and we start doing litigation and we start off where we are doing deposition outlines or we're doing law in motion, and we find that we just don't like a lot of the work of a particular role that we have. We don't need to stay in those roles. We could either figure out a way to work on these types of cases where somebody else steps in, or we can modify. We can go into a new practice area. There's 100+ practice areas.
Absolutely.
I think there's this ego or self-consciousness that feels like I need to figure out a way to do this, and you don't even realize how many different opportunities there are to practice in different ways. I think, like, I kind of look at it as like you own a supermarket or you're running a supermarket. Like, you don't need to be the person cutting the deli. You could have somebody else cutting the deli meat. So, So and then that brings to mind like finances. So a lot of people assume that lawyers, the one problem they don't have is money. You don't have a problem with money because you're a rich lawyer. And my experience is that, first of all, it's not as lucrative as people think. And you don't have as much, to the extent that you do make good money, it's not like you earn that money. It's not like this windfall type of situation for the most part. And I think there's also this inherent misperception about because I'm grinding, because I'm doing this lawyer tough work, that I'm going to make so much money and that part of my life is not going to be a problem. And then your families have that perception and people around you have that perception. It's this whole cascading effect. What's your experience with that issue, or what's your thought on that issue and how people should look at the financial part of it?
Two main things. One is that no amount of money will equate to happiness. Doesn't matter if you're making $50,000 or $100 million. Mentally, with respect to mental health, it's irrelevant. It may shift some stressors somewhere else, but it's irrelevant. That's the first thing, as relates to money. And then, there's also going to be no amount of money that I think that ever satisfies anyone. You're always going to, you get that raise and you're happy with that for a while, and then, when's the next raise coming? That's been one area where I've really, really spent a lot of focus in the last few years trying to worry less about. And it's first off, we are in a profession where, I'm blessed with the money that I do make. I'm cognizant of that. Honestly, back when I was in the fall of 2017, I don't remember what my salary was, but it was more than a vast majority of Americans are making, and it didn't change the fact of how I felt in the slightest. About myself, my mental state. So, I would just say that to the extent you can, I used to read back when I was an associate, articles about this firm's doing this associate bonus and this firm's doing that associate bonus and this is the new salary in New York. And since I got back to work, I don't read that anymore. And you know what? I'm compensated very well for my services. Could we always use it? Could everybody always, would you mind a few more bucks? No. But I try, it's not going to make me, it's not going to, if I made $200,000 more, it wouldn't change my level of happiness long term. For an hour, I'd go buy, a really expensive craft beer. But long term, that's not what's going to equate to happiness.
Sure. And then, okay, so another thing, a lot of people go into work, a lot of people I love going into work because every day is different and you never know what's going to come up. But I think that's also a challenge for a lot of people. Like, hey, maybe I just want some consistency. Maybe I just want to know what to expect. And then people like us who do litigation, that is the ultimate form of a lack of stability, because or inherent lack of stability or perceived lack of stability, because there's literally endless amounts of disputes and roads this thing can go down. How do you think that plays into mental health, and what do you do to sort of stabilize that challenge? Yeah,
that's a definitely a tough one. It's something I still struggle with today because I'm a big list maker. I have to-do lists, and I update not only every day, but frankly every hour. And I'm one of those people who likes checking off when I get something done. And I used to try to have a plan for the day, and I still do to some extent. But just like you mentioned earlier about potentially changing practice areas, if that's something that is going to adversely impact you, perhaps there are other areas of the law where there's a little more stability. I don't know, but certainly you come in the morning with a plan to do X, Y, and Z, and you have a couple calls, and I know I'm going to be out by 5:36. I'm going to the gym, perfect, and then 9:01 happens, and it's like, we have a fire drill on this issue. So, and it took me a while to get comfortable with that, and it's still something, that I struggle with. But, that's also why you have to surround yourself with people that you trust and you can work with. So when you are expecting to do X and something comes in, you can say to, a colleague, hey, can you handle X? Because this issue came in. That's, that to me is extremely important.
And I think it's so important to realize that the things that you don't like to do or that make you uncomfortable, there are people that frankly love or are okay
Yeah.
doing it. And it's that is a ego insecurity thing that I think can't be overstated. Is that we think we just have to be good at it all or
Yeah.
be able to do it all, and just recognizing where your sweet spot is I for me that's been a huge thing. So that's a really good point. And then the attorney-client relationship. So I think one of the big challenges with that is for people who bill hourly, which I think you do. I think what maybe one can perceive as like an inherent conflict of interest, where in order for you to make more money as a lawyer, your client needs to be paying more money to you. I'm wondering how you deal with that.
So for me, here's how I view it. I am 34. I'd like to still be practicing when I'm 74. And I view it as, if I provide, first and foremost, good legal services, excellent caliber legal services, but also cost-effective and efficient legal services, you're going to want to keep coming back to me. So Client X gives us a piece of work, and we bill, some enormous amount of money, and they pay it, and then, it's a fine work product, but I can't believe how much it costs. You may not ever want to work with me again. So the long-term relationship hasn't been built. But if we're able to do that for, on a cost-efficient, effective method, it might be an alternative fee arrangement of some sort that, helps you out and is still good for me, that builds trust, and that builds a long-term relationship. So that when I'm 74, you're still my client. And a lot of the companies I work with are small to mid-sized companies, up to 250 or 500 employees. And I'll start working with them when they're 10 or 20 employees. At the beginning, their resources may be more scarce. But then when they've got 400 and 500 employees and they're bigger projects, they remember, the value that I added and, the free services we offered.
Did you struggle though? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but did you struggle with this, billable requirement thing in terms of, I guess in terms of just mental health, the idea that you have to do X amount of billing to, to keep your job or to do what you need to do?
Yeah, so this is not the answer that anybody else would probably give or wants to hear, but honestly, I've been practicing law almost 10 years. Either at my old firm or at my new firm, I've always been incredibly busy, always had plenty of work on my plate. So meeting a minimum threshold, has never been an issue for me. And I'm only used to the billable model. I've never worked in-house or anywhere else, really. So I'm used to the billable model. I've always had enough work to, thankfully, to meet whatever the minimum hours requirements were. Honestly, what stresses me out more is if there are periods where I'm slow on work and,
Right.
I need to drudge up something. That stresses me out, but not necessarily from a billable hour standpoint, but because I want to be, doing something. I want to be doing work. But
Sure.
So look, I recognize that many other people have different views on the billable hour model, but for me, it's the only thing I'm used to.
Sure. And then like the billable hour requirement just makes me think about big law in general. So candidly, I have always thought of big law as like, okay, even though I've had mental health challenges outside of big law, I was always like, it's just, I can't go there. That's a place where I would be miserable. And that when I saw your articles, it really impacted me because I thought, wow, a guy at Reed Smith has been able to figure this out. How have you been able... Is the perception wrong about big law? What do you see as allowing you to thrive and overcome some of these mental health challenges despite being at a big law firm?
So certainly pre 2016, for the most part, I don't think that perception was wrong. And 2016 was when the ABA issued their kind of landmark study on attorney mental health. And I think to a large extent now, there's still some firms that are hesitant to get on the bandwagon with the mental health train. For me, look, when I approached my firm and said I needed some time off, I honestly didn't know how they would respond, but I also kind of didn't care because I had no other choice, as I felt that I felt I was going to lose my personal and my professional life if I had to take some time off. So
yeah, but you did, man. You did have a choice, and like what you did was super courageous, because like that's a lot of pressure. I know you're saying you didn't have a choice, but people are in that situation all the time and continue to be complacent and let it go. So you need to be like, you made a big impact on a lot of people. I appreciate that. You did.
I appreciate that. And so I didn't know what the response would be. And it was, the response was, take whatever time you need. And then when I got back, a few people had known the specific reason I was out. And more broadly, some other people knew just that I was on a medical leave of absence, just because I had been handling matters for them. So they needed to know that I was out. And, my fear initially upon getting back was, will people still want to work with me? And I found that I ended up starting to work with more people. And I'm not sure what the reason for that, but I felt more comfortable. And, then I found, I didn't find out actually until I got back, even though it had been formed a while back, is that we had this disability inclusion group, leaders, it's an acronym. And, and more firms are starting to form these types of groups, but you meet so many other people who either suffer from physical or mental disabilities, or can relate, or just interested in learning more. And we have a group, now we have a mental health task force. It's just got hundreds of members. And, the biggest thing I think for most people is a feeling of being alone when they feel this, way. And so through this, through leaders and the mental health task force, you meet so many people from, every walk of life, every area of our firm, not just lawyers, staff, to partners with multi-million-dollar books of business, who either themselves have dealt with these issues or a family member, and you're shocked by it because you walk by them in the hall or you read an article about them and you think, oh man, this person must have it all together. They've got the life, they've got this great book of business, or, Law 360 just wrote this glowing article about them. How could they have any problems? And then, you peel away the layers of the onion and you learn, they're just like you. They're no different. Yeah. And that's been the most amazing part.
I think that's so interesting. It reminds me of something that, on my side, I represent employees, but I own a law firm. And so it gives me an eye into what the people on what the parties are on the other side thinking. I have employees, so I have to deal with a lot of the same issues that we deal with in our cases. And you have struggled with mental health, and you have to represent employers, defending claims of disability discrimination, et cetera. And I think it's a good microcosm for the mental health discussion in general, which is to try to understand that we all are sort of in this together, and that we have so much in common, and that the idea that opposing counsel or the opposing party or we ourselves are like this distinct, we're the only person in the world that's dealing with this particular challenge. Right. It's just not real. And I think that's what these conversations hopefully start to make people feel more comfortable being open. And I just want to commend you again, because I think that bold step, it's not easy to do it in a small firm or as a solo practitioner, but there is a greater challenge, I think, for what you did than pretty much anybody else in the field. So I commend you for it, and I think you don't even understand the impact that you did.
I appreciate that, and to anybody in any size firm, but I can only speak to big law. I've only worked in large law firms, and I've been at Reed Smith 7+ years. There is institutional change happening. I have spoken at multiple other law firms about this issue. There is a desire to learn and to change the profession, because we as lawyers suffer more than anybody else from these issues. And again, there could be there are and there could be 1,000 reasons behind that. We don't have enough time to go into all of them. But at most firms, there is change happening or will soon happen. And I'm not going to suggest that anybody should leave their job. But if you're not at a firm, that's supporting you in that regard, or you feel like you can be supported, there are places out there like Reed Smith that will provide you with that support.
That's very hopeful. But before we get to our next segment, what are some practical piece of advice for people that are at firms or in places where they don't know whether the firm will be supportive or not? Maybe they will. What are some ways that you could approach the people in charge about trying to get some support around these areas?
I am, just like you, an employment attorney. So I'm a big believer in HR. I trust HR. I know a lot of people, sometimes don't, are reticent about going to their human resources professionals. I recommend starting there. Talk to your HR professionals. Also, if you have a mental health professional, talk with them, get their sense of things. But that's what I did. I started by talking to our New York HR person. And I said, look, what would it look like if I needed, some help? And, she and I had a conversation, and to my knowledge, she kept it confidential. No reason to think otherwise. And, dealing with HR on a daily basis, I know for a fact that, just from my experience, is that the vast majority of them want to help employees, want to do the right thing. I understand that there, some employees feel like HR is just a funnel up to management. And unfortunately that can be the case at some companies, but, I have not found that to be the case. Certainly not at Reed Smith, and not at most companies. They do take these issues seriously and are starting to take them more seriously. So utilize that. If your company provides, an employee assistance program, reach out. You can reach out there. There may be some sort of confidential hotline. If you have a person that, a colleague that you trust in the organization, a friend, could be a mentor, reaching out to him or her. To gauge what they think the response might be. So for me it was HR, but, there's usually in most organizations someone that you can reach out to.
Yeah.
And yeah. So.
And just to on a sort of hopeful, positive note, how do you feel today after all this work that you've done, after all the change that you've enacted and been part of? How do you feel?
It kind of feels surreal, because all I think I did was write a couple articles and give a couple speeches. Yet at the same time, I've met literally thousands of people who I've gotten to talk with them about my experience, about their experience. And, this is all just in the past, 2.5 years total of everything happening. And then, really since I went public, a year and 3 months, year and 4 months. So I just kind of feel like, hey, I just told a story that happened to me in the hopes that it might help one person. I'm not special. I'm not unique. I just wanted to help somebody. And, what I hope my kids, who's right over there, this is like that CNN moment. Hey, bud. Here, come here.
The kids love
We'll have a guest. We'll have a guest on the podcast.
Wow.
He's graduating from preschool on Friday. We'll have him as a guest for a moment.
And that's actually a good point, because our kids, and I have two beautiful sons. Our kids deserve the best version of ourselves, and these.
So, just what I was going to say was that when I'm old and gray, what I want him, to be proud of. Yes, I'd like him to be proud of. My dad was a really good lawyer, but I think that, this is something that he can look back and say, my dad did something, that I'm proud of and that I respect. And anyway,
that's amazing.
I'm good downstairs.
Okay, let's move on to Deal of the Week. My deal of the week is don't believe in false choices. So Don't believe that in order to be a lawyer, you have to be miserable. Don't believe that in order to be happy, you have to have tons of money. This kind of sounds familiar to our conversations, but if you spend your life thinking that X is only possible if Y is true, I think you're going to be spending your lifetime chasing a BS dream. And so don't believe in false choices. Mark, what is your deal of the week?
So you asked me in advance to prepare a deal of the week, and you didn't tell me that you were going to preface it with that, but I think it ties in perfectly. And my deal of the week, you said it could be a documentary or something. It's a documentary called Minimalism. I encourage everyone to watch it. It's about people who changed their entire worldview. Very, materialistic people, and some even not so materialistic people, just changing the ways they lived and differently. It's all different types of people. And the impact it had on them in terms of their positivity and their mental outlook. I will be the first to say that I am not a minimalist. My wife is not a minimalist. But I watch that documentary every 6 months because I try to take a little nugget out of that. Because it's not just about the concept of, shedding 3/4 of your closet. It's not about that at all. It's about changing your viewpoint on what is and is not important in your life. And when I mentioned being 74 older. When I'm at the end of my life, what am I going to look back on and remember was important to me? And so it's on Netflix. It's been on Netflix for years. It's called Minimalism. That is my deal of the week.
I love it.
Fantastic. I watch it every probably 6 months.
That's a great deal of the week. Okay, I will check that out. So, legal tip of the week. This is brought to you by Smith & Benowitz. We're in New York and California. I say New York. I usually just say California, but we are in New York and California. Employment, personal injury, and class action law firm. If you're experiencing any physical or mental health issue, you may be entitled to a leave of absence or some other form of accommodation. So consult with an experienced employment attorney. We're always available to talk. Mark, what's your legal tip of the week?
My legal tip of the week, I'll give 2 tips of the week. And one goes back to, my true belief that most employers, and the vast majority of employers, inclusive of HR, want to do the right thing for their employees. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but frankly, mistreating an employee can end up in a lawsuit from somebody, somebody like you. No,
Sure.
I'm kidding. But so most employers, so if you're having an issue at work, and it could be from sexual harassment and needing some time off, go speak to HR, whomever the person is that you should speak, who's there to speak to you. They're there to help you. You don't need to suffer or have any issues in silence. And the other thing I would say, just given the circumstances right now, is for every business, as they rush to reopen and want to get their physical in-person operations back on track and the viruses, take a step and think about, making sure that they have the safety and the health protocols in place so that their employees can come back to a safe and healthy workplace. And if that means, you need to stagger when employees come back to work, you need to allow, you need to maybe change your mindset a little on remote work long term. That's important to do rather than just rushing back the first day, your state or your city allows reopenings. Really putting into place measures, everybody says the new normal, brave new world, but we really are there. And so making sure that employers take those steps and develop protocols and plans to make sure that, yes, they're returning to their profitability and, but at the same time, making sure that everyone is safe and healthy in the workplace.
Awesome. Mark, isn't it scary when you sign up for a subscription, but the trial period requires your credit card?
Sure.
Well, wouldn't it be great if you never had to submit your actual credit card number, or you could block the merchant from charging you until you've approved it?
Actually, it would be, yes.
Okay, well, that's how it is with Rockpaper. You create a proxy credit card on demand that's linked to your actual credit card or debit card. The merchant can only charge you when you say so, and you don't have to give your actual credit card to another third party. It's that simple. Get Rock Paper, ROCKPAPR.com. Get Rock Paper, join the movement.
Actually, it's funny. My wife didn't sign up for something yesterday for that exact reason. She didn't feel like giving them her credit.
There we go. So get Rock Paper. We learned a lot today. You are super inspirational to a lot of the lawyers out there, particularly me. We really appreciate the time. If you could tell us, how do we get a hold of you? If somebody wants to talk to you about mental health issues, how do they get a hold of you? And any parting words?
Sure. So you can get a hold of me through Reed Smith's website. My email address, I believe it's there, mgoldstein, Goldstein, @reedsmith.com. Since everybody seems to have it now, in their signature blocks, my phone number is 917-309-1541. That's my cell. You can call me. You can text me. I have had plenty of people who I don't know, never met before, call me. I've picked up the phone numerous times and heard someone just sobbing on the other end. With the clear disclaimer that I have no professional training, I can only tell you kind of what I've been through. I'm happy to talk anytime to anyone who feels like they need a resource and just isn't sure who to turn to. And just my parting words is that, it's the year 2020. In 2010, we had made very little progress on the issue of mental health, and frankly, it was not an issue that I even cared about or thought about. So my hope is that by the year 2030, we are leaps and bounds, and together by people like yourself doing this podcast, like people who speak out and talk about these issues, in the year 2030, we'll have made even more immense progress. And then the year 2040. And it's only by talking about these things, writing about these things, doing podcasts about these things, that, we can come to learn that a mental health disability is no different. You shouldn't feel any differently than if you had a physical disability. I was speaking with a colleague last week and reminding him that, what he was feeling was no different than, and what he was considering in terms of next steps for his career. He should consider it no differently than if he'd been diagnosed with cancer and the doctor said, hey, you need to take 10 weeks off to undergo chemo. You need to protect your physical health, of course, but your mental health as well. And I think everyone, who's reached out and who I've had an opportunity to meet in the last year and a half, like I said, it's been surreal.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll have you on again. Thank you so much for your time.
LawFlip, objection, Your Honor.
Turn the game upside down.
LawFlip, objection, Your Honor.
Turn the game upside down.
Okay, so Arian, they're asking where they could find us. So for LawFlip, it's at LawFlip and LawFlip.com. For Smith & Benowitz, our law firm, which does personal injury, employment, and class actions, you can find us at Smith Benowitz and SmithBenowitz.com. For the personal stuff, like where you're really going to find the juicy stuff, at Benjy Smith and BenjySmith.com. At Wages Guru and LewisBenowitz.com for Lewis. Oh, so LawFlip is produced, directed, and edited by the young legend Arian Tabibian. Visual effects and compositions by another young legend, Oren Azad. Intro music provided by Pen Practice. Pen Practice, what is it? Premium instrumentals for upcoming artists by the music industry's top producers. For more info, visit penpracticemusic.com. I had so much fun recording the intro song with my man Hilton Deuce Wright. Looking forward to hearing more and more from Pen Practice. So the LawFlip identity, this hot logo that you're looking at, created by Garret, Whisten, and Travis Nagle. Special thank you to Shai and Seth from the Horwitz Marketing Agency. A huge thank you to Aaron and Vanessa from Smith & Benowitz for endlessly dealing with all of our podcast bullshit. And lastly, a huge thank you to our beautiful wives, Julie and Lisa, for supporting our vision, and all the love to all of our four boys combined. Disclaimer, this podcast is made available by Smith & Benowitz for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is only intended to provide general information and opinions about legal and other concepts, and is not intended to be used as a source of legal advice or relied on for legal advice. By listening to this podcast, you understand that no attorney-client relationship is being formed between you and Smith & Benowitz or any of its attorneys. This podcast should not be used as a substitute for competent legal advice from a licensed professional attorney in your state.